Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Evening of Roses Gala. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Heather Mecca, and I'm chair this year of the Sister Rose Thiering Fund. I wanted at first to acknowledge and welcome all of our guests, especially our supporters, our donors, our founders, our current and former board trustees, advisory council, former chairs in attendance, multiple clergy of various faiths, our former award winners, Father Phil Latronico, chair of the Archdiocesan Commission of Interreligious Affairs, our honorees, Rabbi Dr. Michael Berenbaum and Reverend Forrest Pritchett, John Paparsanos, Vice President for University Advancement here at the University, Seton Hall, to our teacher scholars, our families, and our friends, Dean Jonathan Farina, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Miss Maud Dom, and Miss Brianna Doherty, who are representing the New Jersey Commission on the Holocaust. Founding Executive Director, David Bosman, my former professor. And we're going to be very brief. I tried to extend my comments in the message in the ad journal because we wanted to give you as much time as possible to mingle and enjoy each other and good food and drink. And so I'll get started. My time here with Sister Rose Thiering Fund began in 2017. I was a teacher scholar, and I had the privilege of learning from some of you in the room. Dr. Bosman, Rabbi Brill, Dr. Slutsky, to name a few. I took those lessons with me, and I carry them every day as I work with young people in the classroom. One of my favorite parts of being involved with the board has been in the outreach we've done to teachers and to teachers who we want to invite in to join us. And this fund changed my life because it gave me some opportunities to learn and share and carry forward. As you know, we are losing survivors as years go on, as time goes on. And in fact, we lost 3 very, very important people to us here on the fund this year. And those losses are hard. And we know that the work is not done. So it is our job to carry that work forward and carry Sister Rose's mission in all that we do. So I thank you for being here. We have the privilege tonight to hear from 2 amazing speakers, Rabbi Dr. Michael Berenbaum, who is well known in the field of Holocaust studies, museum architecture, and consultation and design, and also an expert on anti-Semitism, which unfortunately we see an increasing rise every day. And that is why our work is so important, that it carry forward. And we take that very seriously. We will also be hearing from Reverend Forrest Pritchett, who is a civil rights leader and professor here at Seton Hall. And in the few times that I have heard him speak at our events, he has given me wisdom and knowledge, and he has shared so much. And I know he does that for his students as well every day. So we are thrilled to honor him. It has not been an easy year, not locally, not nationally, not globally. And I believe that what we do here does make a difference. And I thank all of you who have been friends of the fund, who are supporters, and I'm so glad you could join us tonight. And with that, I want to introduce or invite up, he needs no introduction, Dr. Tony Ciclitano, Executive Director.
Greetings, welcome to all. I want to begin with a note of gratitude for all of you who came out tonight in the sweltering heat. To our wonderful chairperson, Heather Mecca, who is, and she would never say this about herself, but is the winner of this year's Sister Rose Thering Award given by the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. She's an extraordinary leader, and we are incredibly fortunate to have her on our team and our leadership. I want to thank our dynamic board of trustees who put so much energy and thoughtfulness into everything we do. I want to thank Ann Bergmeyer, who works tirelessly to make this evening special each and every year. The amazing Maisie Mountcastle in the back, I believe. Our new administrator, who seemingly bends time to her will to accomplish everything necessary in exemplary fashion. And finally, to our host institution and my employer, Seton Hall University, for providing the home for the Sister Rose Thering Fund for now over 3 decades. Recently, a friend of the fund observed that we are living in crazy, scary times, her words. I fear I lack the power of the angels to say to you with any authority, be not afraid. What I can do is repeat the question of our trustee, James Gerlin, what would Sister Rose do? Or as we like to say, WWSRD. The bracelets are on sale in the lobby for those who are... If a precise answer to this question is impossible, we can nevertheless think about 3 things that Sister Rose certainly did do: teach, build, and stand firm. Sister Rose was an educator who did all she could to educate her church, students in the College of Education who would go on to be teachers, students in the Jewish Christian Studies program, residents of New Jersey more broadly through the Holocaust Teaching Mandate and the Commission, and the dozens of people from all walks of life who went with her to Israel in any one of her over 50 trips. Sister Rose was also a builder, along with many others, some of whom are in this room. Sister Rose helped build not only a program with an endowed chair of Jewish Christian Studies, but also a culture at Seton Hall of respect for human dignity, resistance to anti-Semitism in all its varieties, love for the Jewish people, and solidarity with all those of goodwill. Third, we must, like Sister Rose, stand firm in our mission and identity. Sister Rose exhibited this steadfastness in the face of Austrian officials when she protested the election of Kurt Waldheim, and our current moment requires this steadfastness to build and renew our culture through education, empathy, and solidarity. A brief word on empathy, which of late has come under some attack, believe it or not. Empathy is decried today as the property of the soft and emotionally overwrought. What those who say this hide, not least from themselves, is that empathy is too difficult for them, and so they have given up on it. Closing our hearts to others is easy. It removes the burdens of complexity, nuance, and responsibility for those who suffer in our midst. A closed heart creates a simple and neat world entirely inadequate to the truth of the one we inhabit. Susan Feinstein provided a profound I get a little emotional about this one, but example of this virtue at a board meeting about 4 days after the October 7th attack on innocents. I remember we were all in a kind of shock at what had happened. During the meeting, Susan voiced both the despair and the values of our community when she asked, quote, "And what is going to happen to the Palestinian people?" Even in the midst of digesting the horror of what had occurred, she held firm to her humanity, her capacity for empathy for those who we knew would suffer terribly. This was no soft-headed emotionalism, but rather a strong refusal to allow our humanity to be diminished by the evil acts of others. Empathy expands our humanity. Its refusal shrinks it. This is a time that asks us to stand firm in our work for the good of our neighbors and our neighborhoods, for those we encounter along our road as the one in need, to seek communion in truth and refuse to be turned away by lies. Indeed, to walk together to repair this world of ours. So welcome, and may this be one of many times we come together to learn, to build, and to hold firm to the better angels of our humanity. Thank you. And now I am very grateful to ask Monsignor Anthony Zaccardi to give the invocation for this evening. Anthony is the Assistant Professor of Biblical Studies and great friend to the Sister Rose Thering Fund and an honoree in 2023. Thank you.
Let us pray. Blessed are you, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God of Israel, and King of the universe, through whose word everything has come to be, to whom every knee shall bend, and by whom every tongue shall swear. You have made the world a habitable and sustaining place for men and women, whom you made in your own image and likeness, to be fruitful and multiply, to exercise dominion, to steward your creation, to be keeper each of his brother and sister. By your gracious election of Israel, you have made known both yourself and your will, and you have called humankind to share in your holiness and to walk in your righteousness. By the greatness of your name and the strength of your arm, you have raised up against the enemies of your people and of humankind prophets and sages, teachers and priests, courageous leaders and zealous followers to withstand evil, to stem destruction, to reverse ruin, and so reshape the world and human society in accord with truth, goodness, and beauty. And you have blessed our eyes and privileged our ears to know and to enjoy the benefits of their labors, the passion of heroes such as Sister Rose Thering and Monsignor John Osterreicher. Grant that this gathering may be a holy and righteous assembly as we rededicate ourselves to the work of repairing the world, and as we honor those who have labored assiduously and accomplished much, so that justice might flow down from the hills and your glory might cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. As we share your blessings this night and pause even now in a moment of silence for those who have recently put down the burden of their labors to enter into much-deserved rest, especially Luna Kaufman, Marilyn Rosenbaum, and Father Lawrence Frizzell. May their memory be unto us a perpetual and powerful blessing, and may your own great name be blessed forever and ever. Let all say, Amen. And let us bow our heads in a moment of silence.
Thank you. I just want to ask Dean Jonathan Farina to come up to address us. Jonathan is the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, a wonderful supporter of the Sister Rose Thering Fund, and I'm going to set him up here, but also a wonderful speaker. So.
Thank you, Tony. I was told to be quick. If I knew you were going to flatter me, I'd prepare something longer. But good evening, everyone. Short and sweet. So welcome to Seton Hall and welcome to the Evening of Roses. As you know, the Sister Rose Thering Fund's annual gala, I'll say soiree tonight because we're having hors d'oeuvres, is here to raise money for student scholarships and honors those who work tirelessly to advance Sister Rose's legacy by fostering understanding and cooperation among Jews, Christians, and peoples of other religious traditions through advocacy and education. And indeed, it's an honor to house the Sister Rose Thering Fund and the Jewish Christian Studies program in the College of Arts and Sciences. because they encapsulate entirely what our mission is about. The Department of Religion, for example's entire focus lately has been interreligious dialogue, the relationship between peoples of different faiths. And last week, we had a Mass on campus to celebrate Dr. Katya Passerini and to say farewell to her, our provost. At the end of the month, she will depart Seton Hall after 5 transformative years to become president of Gonzaga University. And at the Mass we had in celebration of her move, University President Monsignor Joseph Riley reminded us that we are all the sum of our relationships, the relationships we have with our families, with our friends, with our work, with each other, with people beyond. We pursue and respect, as a university, our relationship is to truth and to our communities. Philosophy literally means the love of truth. And we respect and care for all people, people of all faiths and of none, people of all nations. The work of the Sister Rose Thering Fund enriches this relationship building, and we are proud to host its work and to be defined by our collective promotion of understanding and cooperation among faiths. And I hope that the structure of tonight's event fosters more relations amongst you out there. Monsignor Riley also spoke of the 2 movements of God's love. And so we have relationships with those that we love, our friends, our family, and they make us feel good. It feels warm inside when you are with someone you love. But that same love pushes us outward and makes us uncomfortable. We do things for one another that is hard. And I ask tonight that we remember that too, that it's precisely because we love each other, because we love humanity and our neighbors and those we don't know, that we have to do the hard work of helping them, putting ourselves out there, standing firm, as Tony put it in his beautiful remarks. So let us remember that too, that love both makes us feel good and makes us work hard and makes us uncomfortable. Tonight, we honor in particular Michael Berenbaum, Distinguished Professor of Jewish Studies and Director of the Ziggy Ziering Institute, exploring the ethical and religious implications of the Holocaust at the American Jewish University. And we honor our very own Reverend Forrest Pritchett, Director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Program and a faculty member in the Africana Studies Program. Forrest has been a valued member of the Seton Hall community now for well over 40 years. 40 years of working across divisions and connecting academics with activism and student success, and really helping build our community as a model of that kind of relationship between not just learning and the love of truth, but then going and loving the community in turn with what we have learned. I thank you all for joining us and supporting these scholarships and our students and these individuals who in turn teach hundreds of other people in New Jersey and across the world how to be more understanding and loving neighbors, how to develop relationships with the world. I thank again Anthony and Maisie for their work organizing tonight, and I encourage you all to remember that the work we do of loving the world is uncomfortable work, but necessary work, and we are in it together. So thank you again for coming to Seton Hall, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Now I have the profound honor of introducing Reverend Forrest Pritchett to you, although Jonathan has done that nicely already. But Reverend Pritchett is the recipient of this year's Clergy Award from the Sister Rose Thering Fund. This is only the second time we've given this award out. Reverend Pritchett is an extraordinary person, extraordinary colleague. And you'll see my comments more on him also in the ad journal, so I'll point you to that. Reverend Pritchett started at Seton Hall University in 1978 after completing 9 years at Rider and William Patterson Universities. The presence of Sister Rose, he says, and Newark Archdiocese Auxiliary Bishop Joseph Francis, one of the 4 black bishops in the United States, impacted him like, quote, God's squad at Seton Hall. They facilitated additional growth for him from his student activism in the 1960s into his university activism at Seton Hall. Pritchett's civic engagement involves the development of nonprofit agencies to increase reading literacy, to increase funding for child care agencies, to aid families of the incarcerated, advocate for the incarcerated, community-controlled employment development facilities, and facilitating, of course, dialogue between Jewish and African American communities. He has mentored students and faculty alike as program of the Seton Hall University Gospel Choir, the Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Association, one of the places I met him many years ago, and as an assistant dean, always pushing us to do better as a university. He's an encourager, a director, and a comforter. And it is for all of these reasons that I invite Reverend Pritchett to the podium to present him with the 2025 Sister Rose Thering Fund Clergy Award.
Thank you, Tony, and I thank all of you for being here. I thank my colleagues from the College of Arts and Sciences, and my wife. You know, this tonight's event on the 12th of June is like a postscript to our anniversary, which was yesterday. So I like my girlfriend of, I think she was my wife. I don't know if it would have lasted that long, but I like my girlfriend of 58 years to please stand up. She is in the clergy realm. She's known as Reverend Barbara Pritchett at this point, and I might just add, for those who might do religious studies. Actually, in the Protestant church, there was a time when women could not be elevated. So that was a struggle in itself for us. I just shared that as a side note. But what I'm going to do very briefly is just do the thing I do, which is I don't even talk from textbooks anymore. It's like when I met Sister Rose, she asked me one question. She said, "Can you please sit with me and just tell me what it was like being a student in a university in the 1960s. She said, and don't gloss over, she said, tell me the nitty-gritty. And then I'll intersect that with perhaps when David Bossman was the director of the Thering Fund and so forth. It was David in his wisdom and vision who gathered a few of us from the university, and he asked us to be available for a week in May when all of the persons were finishing up perhaps their training. He said, I'd like to have a few of you in the room, so as almost like a rite of passage, so that when these students are giving their presentations, I want you all to react to those presentations. So, and then to coax us there, Dave would have coffee and munchkins and everything else to keep us out. So I share that because others may ask, beyond me receiving this award tonight, I have some historical roots with the visionaries behind the Rose Thering Fund. So I'll keep this as concise and as brief as I possibly can. I do feel it uncomfortable sometimes accepting awards for the work that if you read the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, or you read the Bible frequently, you know that in one sense we're expected to do the extraordinary. So I think receiving awards and accolades for doing what you're supposed to do anyway, I have to acknowledge to God, if you're listening to me at this point, that I humble myself before you. I'm often influenced by the words I could see in Jeremiah 29, which says, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, and to give you hope and a future. So God knows, and he knew the plans for each and every one of us when we were conceived in our mother's wombs. So once again, it was only I who was reluctant to do anything at all. I think that was, you might say, of the good nature before I became a teenager. Growing up, I was born during World War II. So for many of my students today, that automatically means that what they're about to hear is what they call classical history. When I was growing up, classical history meant something totally different, but this is classical history, according to one of my students. But I was born during World War II, and consequently, the America that I knew, as much as I could comprehend it, they went into a period of depression before we had the relative prosperity of the 50s. All I knew is my mother could tell me stories that a little boy did not want to hear about standing in line even for a loaf of bread. I remind some of you of those moments. But I say all that because it humbled me. When I would go south which is called a family vacation to most colored people, and we simply would visit the home of our relatives. My cousins would say, Forrest, do you want to go play in the haunted house? And I would say no. 40 years later, what did we discover? The haunted house is actually the home of a Mr. Jeremiah Collins, who in 1786 purchased 4 Africans off of a shipment from the Guinea coast. 80 years later, when the Emancipation Proclamation becomes effective, he owns over 10,000 acres, and he has 800 Africans on that plantation. Once I could comprehend those items, I could see where God wanted somebody to speak up for those who could not speak for themselves. So this is what I began to tell Sister Rose when she asked the question. I said, when I left Atlantic City High School in 1961, I was really very average academically. I ran track with more proficiency. But I had an opportunity, like many of those who were Negroes, to go south as opposed to the probability of us getting into any of the northern colleges. That year, Delaware State was starting their very first honors program, and I was a member of that first cohort. And the very first day in class, as every day, the instructor made us read the New York Times from cover to cover. And they would every day would give us in English a brief quiz. They would ask you 3 questions, something that would have occurred. I only say this to say it kept us tuned in. That would always be followed by a moment of critical thinking. So I share this with you. The first critical question we were asked was, what is the greatest threat to America in 1961? So we are the generation who, through the 50s, periodically, when the air raid sirens would go off in the city, your teacher would tell you, please crawl under your wooden desk. You will be protected from an atomic bomb. Please, laugh, understand. So we all raised our hands at Delaware State first class. We wanted to impress the professor. And we said, we were looking around like everybody should have their hands up. They did. And they said, it's the atomic bomb controlled by the Russians. He said, no, it's not. The greatest threat to America is a Negro man or woman who has a college degree, who loves God. And we started looking at each other and said, why haven't we heard this before? What does this mean to us? But we went on to define what that meant for us, because it meant that there were different truths in our environment, and that many of the things we were being told were deceptions, if you would. Several weeks later, after some of us from the North were challenging our classmates from the South to find out why they had never done anything about segregation, we ended up having a sit-in. I might add, at the first discussion of the sit-in, 300 people showed up. When it came time to asking for volunteers, 100 students raised their hands to volunteer. That morning, the student government prepared all the buses. They were there. 7 students showed up. We go forward to be locked up. We call our parents to ask for $50 in bail money, and mom says, I don't have it, and she starts to cry. She also starts to curse me out, because she says, you know damn well the Klan is coming in here tonight to kill all of you. That was the reality. It was not encouragement, it was the fear. I share all that because 2 weeks later, after the NAACP actually showed up at midnight to bail us out, 2 weeks later, on a beautiful Friday night like this, they normally show the movie on campus and we'll have a dance. By midnight, everybody had to be walking back to their residence halls. This was the reward we received. Young Klansmen wannabes pulled their cars on campus, turned off the lights, and started mowing down my classmates. One young man ended up with 100 broken bones in his body. We went to the hospital. They could not lay him in a bed because they said they'd had to give him so many drugs that it would not be good, and gravity would not help. So they had him suspended from the ceiling. He looked like Frankenstein. I mention this because it's a graphic image, but indeed, that's the kind of stuff that made me the man that I am today. But once I finished my freshman year at Del State, I started, we were challenged also during that year to begin to identify for ourselves how we would like to be known at the end of our lives. That sounds like a very horrific type of thing to contemplate. The idea was that if you know where you're going in life, you'll know exactly how to get there. If you don't know where you're going in life, any road will take you where you're going because you don't know where you're going anyway. I thought I'd like to, based on what I saw in Atlantic City, where 85% of the population were unemployed, during the cold months, but our population in Atlantic City normally was 30,000. When it got warm, the population in Atlantic City was 250,000. But 85% of the Negro population, having lived in the South, had no skills to pull upon. They were totally dependent upon hourly wages. So they only worked when it was warm. So my first mission in college was to figure out how do we create year-round employment. But beyond that, I ultimately realized that when the federal government increases the minimum wage, a very interesting thing happens. I've read this in my economics class, and the interesting thing is what they do in many companies is that 12 months later, their payroll will be paying out the same amount of money that they were paying out 1 year earlier. Can you figure out why? Because every time the government increases the minimum wage, companies will decrease their workforce by 15 to 20%. So I said, this is an ever-ending circle, and it's difficult. So the second problem that I picked for myself, and that ties right into tonight's mission, I thought I might have a better shot at the following issue. I said, for 400 years, people of African descent have been exploited in the Western Hemisphere, and I'd like to figure out how to end all of that. So I said, perhaps one route I can take is by studying the history of any other group who has been systematically oppressed. And that is what took me to study Jewish history from the very beginnings. And that's what Sister Rose found very fascinating, because I was not under any faculty advisement at that point in time. This is something that I wanted to do totally for myself. So in that context, for example, I learned about the Jewish diaspora, for example. I also knew that in the 1960s, the National Rabbinical Council was very concerned because of outmarriage within the Jewish culture. So I was thoroughly familiar, but I was also very much focused upon what did they do to survive wherever they were. And then I also became intimately familiar with the value system of Jewish culture, from trustworthiness to respect, caring, responsibility, keepers of the earth, and all of the Hebrew words that went along with that. And I was particularly interested in the following philosophy, Tikkun Olam, the repairers of the world. Therein I saw a brotherhood with the Jewish community. The last story I will tell will be as follows. In 1970, I had the honor of, because of the discrimination being received by Shirley Chisholm, if you remember the black congresswoman from Brooklyn, she ran for the presidency and people tried to laugh her off of every arena she went into for two reasons. She was black, she was a woman. I called her office to say, I don't have any really expertise in the political realm, but if you need any volunteers in New Jersey, I'd be more than happy to volunteer. In the 1980s, Jesse Jackson was running for president of the United States. The black church throughout this nation, within 72 hours, came under Jesse to support him. I became Jackson's North Jersey spokesperson. In that context, some of you may be old enough to remember in the early 1980s, Jesse made a comment as they were flying back into the United States, which one of the reporters thought was rather anti-Semitic. When I saw this story beginning to break in the newspapers, I knew that the power of the historical relationship between the Jewish community and the Negro community could not be broken because the devil was about to raise his head in America to break up that coalition. I started calling rabbis in Morris County at that point just to say that we need to sit and talk. I said, we need to be proactive and not wait until the whole thing falls apart. And they said, well, what do you have in mind? I said, I think we need to begin to have dialogues between our Jewish congregations and African American congregations. We need to be honest. We need to sit there, I said, because we're about to be challenged out of our skin, and if we're not prepared, we could end up being at each other's throats. I say all of that to say that for all of us as we go forward, let us all think about the following comment. We need to learn how to work together, as Martin Luther King would have said, as brothers and sisters, or we shall all perish as fools together. Dr. King reminded us, and I say this in reference to everything that's occurring in America today. There's a good historical example I'll call to your attention. Dr. King also said this about the man we all agree was one of the worst people ever on the face of the earth, Adolf Hitler. Dr. King said, remember, everything that Hitler did was legal. I say that in reference to our current situation in America. Let us be members of the discernment that God would be pleased to call his people on this earth. Thank you so much for this award tonight.
I think it's fair to say that every time Reverend Pritchett speaks, the arc of history bends a little bit more towards justice each time. And now I would like to, I'd like to ask Frank Stebbins to come up to present Rabbi Berenbaum with this year's award. Thank you. Frank is the vice chair of the Sister Rose Thering Fund.
Thank you, Tony. Author, historian, documentarian, scholar, founder, museum director, rabbi, father, grandfather. A few titles that our next honoree has. To sum up the work of Michael Berenbaum in 2 to 3 minutes is beyond intimidating, it's impossible. So the only way I can think of how to do so is asking each of you to pause and take a moment to think about the impact that he and his lifetime of work have had on us all, either professionally and personally. If we were all to think about that too long and to share, we wouldn't be here 2 to 3 minutes, we may be here 2 to 3 decades. And in the words of the honoree himself, for an evening to be immortal, it need not be eternal. However, some of our stories may focus on the work of Dr. Berenbaum, world-renowned educator, researcher, caretaker of memory, who has shaped the work of thousands of educators in New Jersey, in the United States, and internationally, with one common goal of the constant encouragement to keep learning, to keep doing the work, especially when the work seems impossible and difficult. Some of us may share stories about the work of Rabbi Berenbaum, the trusted voice across the table, at the other end of an email, at the other end of a phone call, that always gets answered, regardless of the engagement that he's attending or the time zone that he's in. Some of us may even have stories of the impact he's had as Michael, a man who cherishes time with his family and a good baseball game. Only, especially if his team is winning. Regardless of that, the one constant factor that we all see is that whether he's talking to a room full of world leaders or a class of 5th graders, and if you have the opportunity to do either, I encourage you to do so, it's the same amount of attention, of compassion, of encouragement that you will see. And in each of those rooms, he will leave the audience with one message: have the courage to care. Dr. Berenbaum, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the work that you have done, that you are doing, and that you will continue to do. It is my incredible honor to present with you the 2025 Sister Rose Thering Award in the Humanities and Holocaust Education.
First of all, thank you very much. We just should have recorded that, and when I die, you can say that, and then put me in the ground. I want to do several things very briefly. First of all, when I come back here, it's a little bit of a homecoming. I was born in Newark. My grandparents lived in Newark. And in fact, I drove today over the Pulaski Skyway and recalled all the wonderful memories of going to visit my grandparents in Newark and the neighborhoods and the sense of that. Also, for 15 years, I taught at a Jesuit university, Georgetown, which may be arguably a Roman Catholic university. And therefore, when I come to this community, I feel very much at home. The other thing is I knew Sister Rose, and I have to say that as a young man who was coming out of a parochial school background, I was very surprised because I had presumed that nuns were quiet, were subservient, were gentle, and all of a sudden, and I have to say that I learned the word that I wanted to use today because I was struggling as I prepared my remarks. I was struggling because I wanted to describe Sister Rose as a bulldog, but that doesn't sound right, even though it's accurate. And then I learned from Monsignor that the way to describe her was as a powerhouse, a force, a Macht. And that is that she had a sense of fierceness and of passion, of dignity and of commitment. And she could bend iron, and she did. And that's an incredible, I want to say that bearing an award with her name is a very high honor. I'm also laughing because I'm going to receive another award, which I cannot bring home to my older children because it's an award in the name of Roger Staubach, and they are ardent Washington Commanders, Washington Red Sox things. So I'm going to have to hide that. When I get it, I'm going to leave it with my younger daughter, who's here tonight and who grew up in Los Angeles, so she doesn't have the same type of animus toward Dallas that her oldest siblings have. Let me tell you a little bit about my journey, and we may have marched together. I began college. I came out of parochial school. And by the way, I should tell you how I got into parochial school because it's going to come back to my path. My father had returned from the war. He was beginning his business, and he was of modest means at that point. And we were making Friday evening Kiddush. And I said, "Oh, I know that." And I said, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And by Monday morning, I was in yeshiva. And that was enormously formative. But when I began college, which was to enter into a much larger world, my classmate was Andrew Goodman, one of the three men who had gone down south and who were murdered in the summer of 1964 in Mississippi. And we marched and we worked. And for us, there was and I say this because it's the characteristic of the 60s versus the 2020s. Things were bleak, they were terrible. But we had a sense of optimism that we could change the world. And even as we had this, the question of whether the arc of the universe tilts toward justice is a challenge. We have to make it tilt to justice. Let me talk personally for a moment, a little bit about my journey. I was raised in New York parochial schools. We spoke, and I was raised in a very particular school in which the content of Zionism was the Hebrew language and its rebirth. So I learned Hebrew in a Shakespearean way, and you'll appreciate this as a professor of English. First time I came to Israel, the way I asked for directions in Hebrew was, if your heart inclineth in my direction, would you kindly indicate to me, thy humble self, what is the path that one should take to reach his anointed destination? Everybody laughed. They put me on the loudspeaker in the bus, and gradually I learned how the Israelis had ruined the Hebrew language even as they made it come alive. I was raised in that, and that meant that my teachers were either survivors or refugees who could not tell the story. We heard words: death, camps, children, and we were the generation of ice cream and whipped cream who were to make up for a generation that had been lost. I went to a synagogue that was comprised of German and Belgian Jews who were all in the diamond business, and had escaped in the nick of time because they had portable wealth. If you had real estate, you couldn't take it with you. If you had a store, you couldn't take it with you. But if you had diamonds, you could swallow them, you could put them in your clothes, you could sneak them out, you could do 100 things, and therefore we lived in a wonderful neighborhood, and Maud lived in the same neighborhood. We lived in a neighborhood, and they were trying to recreate in the United States the world that they had left behind. I was then being intrigued by a question. The question that you asked: why did the Jews not go out of business after defeat? Why is it that we are the one ancient people who suffered defeat and exile, the burning of the temples, and went into exile, but rebuilt ourselves, reimagined ourselves, reshaped ourselves, and were rejuvenated by the whole thing, even in the aftermath of defeat? And somebody put their arm around me and said, you know, Michael, you're not asking an ancient question, you're asking the question of your generation, which is, how do we respond to the incredible defeat that was the punishment, the evil, the horror, the loss, the catastrophe. I don't use the word tragedy, but catastrophe that was the Holocaust. And I said, look, I'm an ancient historian, I'm not asking this. And he said, start reading. And I started to read, and I realized that I was asking of ancient history the question that you ask because you're living of it. So if you ask the sum total of my career, and I'm going to disagree with you slightly, because we've reached a certain age and we look backwards. And the first line, I've only written one line of my memoirs because I've lived through some interesting times. And that is the first line of my memoirs, which is pretty good even despite the fact that I wrote it, is that life is lived forward, but it's understood backwards. And what is it that I understood? My life can be summed up in my professional career as a very basic thing, which is I have told the story that could not be told to me, to the American people, and ultimately to the world. And then I gave my teachers and their generation the opportunity to tell their story for eternity, because they couldn't tell it to me. And the rest of my career is the question, what do you do with that story? And then I draw on the biblical example of the ancient Israelites. What did the ancient biblical Israelites do? They remembered the past to endow it with ethical and moral meaning, to change the way in which we dealt with each other, and to make it a particular story that is universal and that reaches out and it demands of us moral behavior, responsibility, integrity, all of the things that we saw in Sister Rose and the like. Now, I have a student of mine in the back, a colleague now, because she's a doctor. And once you give a PhD, then you're no longer a student, you're now a colleague, who speaks about vicarious trauma, but also vicarious resilience. And if we need something in this world now to deal with our current trauma, we also need resilience. Now let me talk for a couple of moments about the incredible accomplishments of Sister Rose and her generation, and talk about what has happened in Jewish-Catholic relations. And I want to say that I was asked twice in one day last week, not last week, it's actually this week. If I think today's Thursday, we were in Toronto on Monday at the AHO conference. I was asked twice, people are saying Holocaust education accomplished nothing. And I said, you know, the extremism of the attack makes it the most easy thing in the world to refute. Let's look at what happened to Roman Catholicism because of the work of Rose Thiering and of John Oestreicher. Pope John, and there's a paradox. The terrible paradox of the Holocaust is that the innocent feel guilty and the guilty feel innocent. And the generation after the guilty feel responsible. Just to prove it for a moment, there's a vast literature of survivor guilt, tiny, tiny, tiny literature of perpetrator guilt. What is the transformation of the Roman Catholic Church? John the 23rd, now St. John the 23rd, and to the Jews we agree with that designation, he is a saint to us, was a man who worked with the Jewish community in Turkey and tried to help Jews in Hungary. He wrote a letter that said the following. He said, "The bearer of this document is a fellow countryman of Jesus and should be entitled to Vatican protection." Notice the words, should be entitled, which is very different than is entitled to Vatican protection, but it works sometimes. He also told the king of Bulgaria that he would, his place in eternity would be denied to him if the Jews of Bulgaria were deported. He then, after the war, when he was the apostolic delegate in Paris, helped return Jewish children to the Jewish people. And that was incredible. And then when he became Pope, he had also studied anti-Semitism with Jules Isaac. And when he became Pope, he got rid of the accusation that the Jews are deicides by using essentially the tools of Orthodox interpretation. Don't have to hear this from a rabbi, but if Christ died for our sins, then the reason for Christ's crucifixion is human iniquity. And that's the way in which the charge of deicide was alleviated. We were helped by the fact that Roman Catholics don't read the Bible. Truth be told. Protestants read the Bible, they got a tougher time. But the other thing that happened is that changed the readings on Good Friday, changed the scriptural reading, and changed what was said. His successor, once removed, was Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, who grew up with Jews. We know that his best friend was a Jew. How do we know that? It's easy to document historically. He asked an Israeli friend of his to take an apartment in Rome because he wanted somebody to walk in to walk into the Vatican who didn't think that he was infallible. Somebody who could talk to him straight as an old friend, and they continued their friendship toward the very end, till the very end. What did he do? He first of all recognized the state of Israel, which means if St. John the 23rd came to terms with 1,878 years of Jewish history, up until 1948 of Jewish Catholic history, then St. John Paul II came to terms with the post-Israel stage of Jewish history. He went to the Jerusalem and went on a pilgrimage to Israel in the millennial year, and he went to pray at the Western Wall, inserting a piece of paper, what we call a kvittel in Yiddish, into the Western Wall, apologizing for the anti-Semitism of Christians. He then went, and he earlier had gone to a synagogue, the first bishop of Rome, and remember, the bishop of Jews have lived in Rome before Jesus. The first bishop of Rome, the first heir of St. Peter to visit a synagogue. Certainly an heir of St. Peter has visited church more than once. And he prayed with the rabbi and addressed the Jews as older brother. Words like that we did not hear very often. And consequently, what we had was a dramatic change. And he also said something else which should have been basic, which is that anti-Semitism is anti-Christian. Imagine if that had been said 40 years before, 50 years before, a century before. And then now we have the recently deceased and bemoaned Pope Francis, who did the final stage in the transformation of Christian teaching, of Catholic teachings regarding Jews, and that is, he said the mission to the Jews has ended. We don't need to convert Jews. They are at one with God as long as they adhere to the original covenant. This is a religious revolution. It's a religious revolution that would be impossible to imagine when Sister Rose and John Ostreicher, Monsignor John Ostreicher, began their work. It is a revolution in part done by the American church, because the American church understood that what was required for religion to thrive is tolerance and decency and respect for the dignity of the other. Those sound like revolutionary words today. Respect for the other, diversity, tolerance, human dignity, human empathy, all of the characteristics, and human kindness. These are essential components, and this revolution started and really took root in these careers, in these people. They could not imagine how far it had come, but it would have never come anywhere without them. And therefore, my daughter will now understand, to the degree to which she listened to me at all, my daughter will now understand why I am so honored to have something that has my name linked to Sister Rose Thiering. So I thank Seton Hall University. I am awestruck by how wonderful this, I'm going to say it, this bulldog of a woman, this deeply passionate nun, and Lord knows nothing stood in her way, or at least anything that stood in her way didn't stand in her way for long. And I think all of you who knew Sister Rose would understand that that is a statement, it may even be an understatement. So I'm deeply honored to have it, and I'm deeply pleased to be with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that moving speech, and it was just wonderful to hear. Can we give a thanks to our two honorees one more time, please? And I just want to thank Maisie again for all her work, for all the people who put this together, Dorota and everyone else, and everyone for coming out. And now I would ask Rabbi Ira Jaskol to come up and say the benediction. Thank you.
Good evening. Avinu Shebashamayim, Heavenly Father, Bless all our distinguished speakers and our two prominent recipients of the Sister Rose Thiering Fund Awards. Bless the memory of Sister Rose Thiering for her visionary work in creating and supporting Jewish-Christian relations and education. Bless Seton Hall University for housing the Sister Rose Thiering Fund. Bless Israel that is fighting, and bless that the killing should end. Pray for the release of all the hostages in Gaza, both those that are alive and unfortunately those that are not alive, so they can come home and be returned to their families. V'alfa b'hadar ga'onu zecha al kol yoshvei tevel artzecha. Appear in your glorious majesty over all dwellers on earth. And let us all say, Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our honorees and our speakers. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everyone for coming, and there are a couple people I need to recognize. First and foremost, Tony. Those aren't for you. No, those are not for you. Those are not for you, Tony. Tony has helped me. This is my first year as chair, and it is unlike anything I've ever done. And I have leaned on several people. Tony is one of those people. His guidance and his mentorship have meant everything. Our board's former co-chairs of last year, Susan Feinstein and Deborah Lerner-Duane, also have been an immense support. So I want to thank you. There are a couple people that have made tonight amazing. And one of those people is Maisie Mountcastle. Maisie, where are you? Can you come accept flowers, please? Maisie came to us this year, and this is not the only hat she wears at Seton Hall. She is also involved with the honors program, and she does not seem like a part-time person. So she has given us her all. She has organized, planned, carried out, and this would never have happened without her. Thank you, Maisie. The next person I'd like to recognize is our student worker, Gabby Teneo. Gabby is a freshman, and she is our student worker, and we sincerely hope we keep her for another 3 years. She is amazing. She is amazing. Tony remarks, and Maisie remarks all the time about how you can't be a freshman because you are just so mature and organized and resourceful, and all of the work that we've done to create a mailing list, a larger mailing list, and kind of organize and make and streamline the process to make it what it is today is the work of Gabby. So thank you. And last but certainly not least is the woman responsible for our food, our drinks, the beautiful setup in the cocktail hour, in the room and out in the lobby, and that is Miss Ann Bergmeyer. Please come up and get flowers. So this is not Ann's first rodeo at this. She has been doing this for many years with a beloved co-chair, Miss Marilyn Rosenbaum. And I would be remiss not to mention her because you see her touch here today. She was working with Ann until nearly her last day on these plans and had real strong interest in what was going on and how to make tonight as successful as it was. And Ann carried out her wishes, and here we are. So I thank you and Marilyn. And with that, we come to the close of our evening. However, we have some delicious desserts and coffee for you out in the lobby and back in our cocktail reception room. Please feel free to linger, socialize, have some good dessert and coffee, and safe travels home. Thank you.